Renowned comic author Frank Miller has struck a partnership with Abrams ComicArts to release select titles as collected editions from Miller's imprint, Frank Miller Presents. I'm Brennan Sem for the New Wave Nerds. Let's get right into the news. Today's story is a Hollywood Reporter exclusive written by Boris Kitt. It reads, Comic author Frank Miller has struck a unique publishing deal with Abrams ComicArts. The acclaimed graphic novel arm of art and illustration-centric Abrams will now be the book publisher of select titles from Miller's independent and self-published book company, Frank Miller Presents. Miller, the creator behind The Dark Knight Returns, 300, and Sin City, becomes the largest big comic name to work with the company, which already works with comics author Brian Michael Bendis and comics painter Alex Ross, and is known for such titles as My Friend Dahmer and The Superhero's Journey. Obviously, we've talked about Frank Miller plenty on various segments of this. He is, like I said in the opening sprawl there, one of the world's most renowned comic authors. He's always ranked among the greats. It's when you talk about some of the most iconic superhero runs and the authors who bring comics to the next level, you always think of Alan Moore, Frank Miller, people. Man, I can't think of any other seminal authors right now, but you think of these caliber, this is who Frank Miller is. They note in the opening paragraph here, The Dark Knight Returns, 300. These are, big comics. Dark Knight Returns, obviously one of the most well-known Batman storylines of all time. It's incredibly iconic. It's so iconic that there was a discussion about the direction that Batman is facing on the cover, right? 300 also, adapted into the Zack Snyder film. Sin City, I'm less familiar with. I haven't seen the film. I didn't think that it was received particularly amazingly well. I believe it's actually directed by Frank Miller, which is interesting. I think he's got some other films in progress as well. But I think this is good for Frank Miller. I think that it's good for him. I think it's good for comics. Having works written by somebody of this caliber made more available to the public, I think can only do well. It can only bring good things, I think, to the industry writ large. Frank Miller he's such a talent, and there is this sort of barrier with comics trying to get them more into the mainstream. I feel like with the industry of comic books, there is a bit of a struggle in bringing in new readers, right? I mean, I feel like it's relatively easy to bring in new children, but to bring in new people who are already formed adults, to get them into this new genre, this style of media, I think is very difficult. There's still a bit of a preconception in the culture when it comes to comic books as a medium. And so I think having somebody like Frank Miller have a publishing deal with this company, and getting those stories out into the broader mainstream, I think can only bode well. And so I'm glad that they were able to reach this deal between Miller and Abrams ComicArts. I think this bodes well. So let's get back into the article here. It reads, the first titles to be released under the partnership will hit in fall of 2024 and include Ronin Rising, Miller's sequel to his acclaimed and influential 1983 miniseries Ronin, and the young adult fantasy Pandora. Ronin Rising will be available in two formats, a collector's edition and a manga edition, via Abrams' new Kana imprint. So I am glad that this Ronin sequel is one of the first ones that they're going to be re-releasing, or is this? I don't actually think, maybe this isn't a re-release. No, it is. Okay, in some way, but I think it's I'm glad that they picked this IP, this Ronin universe, because frankly, I want an excuse to read the original one. I've seen it. I pass it every time we go to Krypton Comics. It's right there. It's immediately under. I can't remember, but there's something in that section that I always go to, and so then therefore I always see the Ronin trade paperback, and it's something that I've always wanted to read, but I've never taken the leap to spend the $25 or whatever it is to get the collected story there. And so I'm glad that this is one that they're doing, because now I have an excuse to go buy the original and read it. To be honest, I didn't realize that it was so acclaimed or influential. I hadn't heard much of Ronin. I just had seen the book itself and read the back and was interested by it. I didn't even realize that it was like a cyberpunk thing, which I don't think actually I've read in this article yet. I think that might be further on down. But I didn't realize that it was so well received, I guess. So is it truly? I don't know. But obviously it's not as influential as any of his other works, and presumably not as incredible as any of his other works. But I'm very excited to read it. And I hope that the story of this Ronin Rising is, at least as well done as allegedly the original one is done. I hope that it's acclaimed and influential, such that it raises the public awareness, I suppose, of Frank Miller, of this IP, such that we get to see an adaptation of another Frank Miller comic. I think, I really enjoyed 300. Like I said, I love his works. I would love to see them taken to the big screen or to a television series in some manner. I think that these stories deserve to cross mediums, I suppose. But let's get back to the article here. Miller launched FMP, so Frank Miller Presents, in 2022 with the goal of self-publishing several titles in the single-issue format, also known as floppies. Floppies. Ronin Rising, I really like that. I wonder if that's... why are they called floppies? I guess maybe because they're the single issue and so they flop. I thought that it was going to be like a reference to like floppy disks, but I'm unfamiliar with, I guess, I know that they exist, but I'm unfamiliar with, I suppose, the purpose and concept of floppy disks to know if there is any actual connection. For some reason in my head, a floppy disk was like an individual like program or thing, and so it made sense that it was the same for single issue comics, but I could have just completely made that up. And it makes more sense that it'd be called floppy because it's single issue, so it's thin and flops. I don't know. There was a pointless aside. Ronin Rising, then known as Ronin Book 2. So when it was released in 2022 under the Frank Miller Presents banner, it was known as Ronin Book 2. Now that it's being re-released in the Abrams ComicArts Collected Edition, they've changed it to Ronin Rising. Okay. That's going to make it a little easier. So I guess I don't actually have to wait then for the new release. I can just cop the original release. Oh no, who am I kidding? I'm going to wait until the collected edition comes out. Who am I kidding? I'm going to want the fancy looking one. So Ronin Rising, then known as Ronin Book 2 and Pandora, were among the initial titles. Abrams will publish the collected editions, putting out a high quality and handsome package the imprint is known for. Okay. One thing. So I guess I can even read Pandora too. I'll have to look into Frank Miller Presents, like how they release those. If are these only single issues? Then I don't really like that. I would like to read them, but I don't have an effective place to store those yet. I guess is the issue. Maybe with the collected editions, they're going to release them in like a hardback format, so then perhaps I can buy those and those can be easily popped on the shelf there. Do I have to, when I put those on the shelf, do I have to put those, are they organized, obviously they would be organized alphabetically under Frank Miller Presents. Okay. So then I can put those on the bottom shelf then. Sorry, now I'm thinking about organizing how I'm going to do this. Back to this. I need to get a place to store single issue comics. Because I do want to get into reading that more. I feel like it's going to be, it's much easier to keep up with the current stories in the single issue manner. So I definitely need to get in the habit of that, but I don't know where to put them. I just don't have the space for it right now, I don't believe. I don't know. I'll figure something out. Let's see. One thing the new partnership does is take the comic titles beyond comic shops and puts them into bookstores, opening up the potential reader base. So this is what I was referencing earlier when I was talking about how I was glad that they were doing this deal with Frank Miller, if they were going to do it with anybody. Somebody whose writing style, or not writing style, but somebody who can craft, these wonderful stories and is able to write a compelling comic, a compelling comic with a story that is well done and does not, it feels in some way that it, quote, transcends the genre of comics, I guess, in the way that The Dark Knight Returns is interesting and 300 are interesting in the sense that they don't feel, maybe I'll just talk about this in reference to Dark Knight Returns. It doesn't feel like your typical DC comic, right? And so it's interesting to somebody who may not like the standard, good guy, whatever, basic comic route. They want a sort of more, a darker, more mature, whatever kind of story. The Dark Knight Returns brings them in. And so I was glad that they're choosing somebody like Frank Miller for this, because I feel like his stories have a greater likelihood of bringing somebody who doesn't normally read comics into the fold, right? Since this puts these editions into bookstores, presumably like a Barnes and Noble, say, the hope on my part is that hopefully somebody who's not very familiar with comics will somehow stumble into the corner wherein the comics are collected and sold and grab this because it doesn't look like it doesn't feel like the way other comics do, and hopefully they start to enjoy the genre, and then the industry itself can be a little renewed. That's a hope. How likely is that? There's really no telling. Like I said, comics as a medium definitely have this sort of connotation in the way, and they haven't quite outgrown it in the way that like superhero movies have outgrown the connotation. They're much more mainstream. Comic books definitely have this impression, I suppose, which it definitely isn't helped by the people, the large portion of people who do enjoy the comics. The comic book shop owner stereotype from The Simpsons, that is a very vocal and large portion of the community that does read comic books, but some of us are normal people, and hopefully some other people really will realize that too, and enjoy these Frank Miller stories and indulge a little bit and help revitalize what is certainly a dying industry. Absolutely, print is dead. Back to the article. Abrams will additionally release other titles and formats down the line and may even release new titles or single-issue series. Those details are still being determined. Quote, Abrams' unique distribution and outreach ensures that the work of our imprint will continue to connect with fans no matter where they may be, end quote, Miller said in a statement. Yeah, sorry, I was confused for a moment. Stated Abrams Comics VP and publisher Rodolphe Lechat. That's what I was confused by. I was going to try and pronounce this name, respectfully and properly, but I couldn't figure it out. Anyways, ComicArts VP had this to say. For 75 years, Abrams has practiced the art of books, and we will use our experimented savoir-faire. our strong market expertise, and Frank Miller's acumen to create the best and most groundbreaking graphic novels with him and his team at Frank Miller Presents. That was probably whoa, I didn't mean to do that. That was probably like the most corporate, snobby, like I'm better than you way to bring yourself to introduce this new comics partnership. That was such a man, I don't even what is the word that I'm looking to use to describe this. It was so, I guess, snobby, but that's not quite the word that I was looking for. But that was such like a wow, like, man, that felt so dismissive, that whole statement, for some reason. I think it was the use of his French. Why does it do that? His use of the French savoir-faire. The only people who use the French term in standard English dialect are snobby and annoying. That's not entirely true. There are some cases where I think it's fun. But what are we doing here? Why are we using this? It's just typically, okay, and this is obviously not true of everybody, but I feel typically people who formulate statements in this manner, they're fake. They're lying. They don't mean what they're saying. There's something else. He's like, we're really doing it. We're really doing this right now. What can I say? How can I disguise my disdain? I don't know. I'm sure he likes comics, whatever. I'm sure he's just glad that hopefully he's going to make some more money. One comic title still waiting to be released is probably the most eagerly anticipated by fans, the Western set Sin City Tale, on which Miller is working with Italian artist Milo Manara. It is unclear whether Abrams or Frank Miller Presents will publish that book, but sources said the hope was to see it hit shelves later this year or early next. Presumably early next. If there's a chance, I'm sure they'll delay it. That's how everything seems to be going these days. For now, readers will have to make do with Ronin Rising and Pandora. Written by Frank Miller with art by Miller, Philip Tan, and Daniel Enriquez. I'm sure that's how you pronounce that. Ronin Rising was Miller's return to his cyberpunk samurai tale that was first published by DC Comics. The story will be published simultaneously in two formats. The first will be a deluxe collector's edition, which will come with all new cover art. Will come with an all-new cover by Miller, a new foreword by DC Chief Jim Lee, and 49 pages of bonus material, showcasing each spread from the 6-issue miniseries as Miller originally intended, in full landscape format. What a sentence! How long does this go for? Hang on, let's see. There's no period. Yeah, wow. 4 lines. Let me do that. Let me read that again. Woo-wee. The first will be a deluxe collector's edition, which will come with an all-new cover by Miller, a new foreword by DC Chief Jim Lee, and 49 pages of bonus material, showcasing each spread from the 6-issue miniseries as Miller originally intended, in full landscape format. Ooh, that is a sentence and a half. The second will commemorate the Japanese roots and influence of Ronin and will come in a traditional manga format. Pandora, meanwhile, tells of a disaffected girl who gets a chance to change her unhappy life when she discovers a flower-shaped relic with the power to warp reality. Miller co-wrote the book with Anthony Marinville and Chris Silvestri, and it features art by Emma Kubert, the daughter of popular X-Men artist Andy Kubert and granddaughter of comics legend Joe Kubert. Check out the first look reveal of the books, which are expected to hit stores in October below. Okay, so here's Ronin Rising. Yeah, so obviously looking at the picture, it's very cyberpunk. But the cover of the original 1980 miniseries does not look cyberpunk at all, and I didn't actually bother to skim through it. So it's very clear now. I don't really like the way that, like, this looks, though. Like, I don't really like this style of cyberpunk. I don't know. I'm obviously interested to read it. I think it's going to be fun. And it's going to be an awesome story, obviously. If it was, critically acclaimed or whatever, enough that, it's getting its own collected edition. The sequel is getting its own collected edition, evidently fairly anticipated sequel. So I'm sure it's going to be good. I'm excited to read it, but I definitely don't really like the design of this character. It's interesting the way that he's angled, though, the way he's posed with, like, his arms. Are these his toes, or are those... Yeah, because I think this is a knee, which means, yeah, these are probably his toes. So what is he standing on? Because I guess at first I had assumed that this was, like, I don't know, like this on the outskirts was, like, the city, and he was, like, mid-air looking up, but I don't know. Weird. This is the one that really caught my eye. I love the design of this cover. This looks dope. I love the I don't even know, like, what the proper term for this technique or whatever would be, but, like, I guess the double exposure of, like, the back. Is this... Why does he look like he's mostly human in this, and then in this it looks like he's, fully robot, basically? I don't know. But I really like the double exposure of having the faces of a woman and child, I guess, on his back. I think that's really cool. And then we have Frank Miller's Pandora, which the story description of which sounded pretty interesting, but I don't really like the colors of this title here. Which means I'm probably not going to like the inking for the rest of the book, but I will probably still read it at some point, because I'm interested to see what this the Kubert dynasty holds. I mean, obviously, like it said here, Andy Kubert, a very important figure in the X-Men. Joe Kubert. I mean, like what were the what did Joe Kubert do? Let's see. Joe Kubert comics. Is it going to give me a list here? Let's switch back. Jew Gangster. Sorry. That caught me by surprise. Golden Age. That's right. He was involved in, or was it? Black Cat, Tarzan, Conan, Damien. I'm confused. This is not what I thought. I thought I recognized Joe Kubert from his, just from his name, and works associated with other things, but I don't recognize any of these comics, I guess. Sergeant Rock, I mean, I'm familiar with the name, but I've never read it. Never read Hawkman. I mean, Punisher Warzone, I know that it exists, and this was one of the... It was the first series of Punisher Warzone. I know that this was, very... I think, if I remember correctly, at least, this was, one of the things that brought Punisher into the limelight. I could be wrong about that. Like I said, I'm not entirely familiar, but... Oh, here we go. Bibliography. I don't know why I didn't even look at that. Oh! I forgot that Wikipedia does not put this in a way that is necessarily incredibly easy to see. Or easy to read. Okay, so obviously it says some detective comics. Before Watchmen, I haven't read that, but I know that that's like a weird anthology series that presumably was not incredible. Action Comics in the 40s. Actually, when was Detective Comics? Oh, just the Hawkman. Superman and the Demon. Okay, let's take a look at Marvel, I guess. Man, yeah, so nothing really. I guess I thought I was familiar with his name. I guess I don't know where I'm familiar with it from then. I've just read it in passing, and for some reason it had stuck in my head. I don't know. I don't know. That was weird. But but I've seen much of Andy Kubert's work. I mean, like I said, I haven't read much of the X-Men, but I've seen a lot of the artwork and stuff, and so I'm curious to see where what this does then. Like I said, the story itself at least is interesting to me. So I think ultimately, the chances are going to be that this doesn't do all that I hope it's going to do, right? The absolute the best that we could hope from this partnership and from this deal would be that the injection of these new titles into the the I don't know, the vendors where typical mainstream readers shop. The best case scenario would be that in so doing, it increases, an awareness and interest into the comic book medium, and hopefully that spurns more sales and hopefully revitalizes. But ultimately, I think that's incredibly unlikely, as much as I would like it to happen. What's much more likely is that these titles are going to be set and released into the ether in these new formats, and they're not going to really be a drop in the bucket, and they're just going to maybe have some interest pre-release, but ultimately fizzle away and fall out of the public eye like most newly released works do. I'm glad that Frank Miller is still, I suppose, making moves and doing things. I hadn't heard much from him in a while. And so it's good to hear that he is working on the back end to get his stories out, and that he is still actively working on writing his own further stories, right? The Western set Sin City. Presumably, if Ronin Rising does well, maybe he'll come back for another sequel or for this Pandora. They obviously mentioned in the article here that he's working on. Abrams will additionally release other titles and formats down the line, and may even release new titles or single-issue series. Those details are still being determined. So I think that it's good to see that Miller is still doing stuff. Like I said, I think he is an important persona in the comics genre, right? In the comics world, in the comics niche. He is an important figure, and hopefully he can continue to write these stories that bring in the more the reader who is less inclined to go towards comics. Hopefully he can help bridge that gap in a way that is satisfying and helps new things happen. But for that, we will just have to wait and see. Let me know in the comments down below what you're interested in seeing from Frank Miller next. If you want to see, some more collected editions from some of his previous works, if you want to see a sequel to something that he's done in the past, maybe you want to see him do a sequel to 300 instead of the movie that I think did not go over well. Perhaps you want him to write another The Dark Knight Returns storyline. I know that there's at least 3 of those. I've only read the first one. I don't know what happens in the other 2, so maybe those put a definitive end on the story. Are you interested in seeing another sequel to Ronin? Or is there, Sin City? I don't know. Other works. Frank Miller has an interesting bibliography for sure, so let me know what you are interested in seeing from him and this partnership with the Abrams ComicArts. Make sure that you like the video and subscribe for more content just like this. We will be back here tomorrow with a brand new news story. I'm Brennan Sem for the New Wave Nerds, and we'll see you guys then.